Mr Carr dropped his verbal petrol bomb outside the entrance police station.
While Mr Greiner can find $82 million for the Eastern Creek Bikeway, police petrol's being rationed. Police vehicles are being taken off the road because this government can't provide them with petrol.
Grant McBride, the ALP's candidate for the still disputed seat, was leaked confidential police documents outlining the policy.
I couldn't say anything about the situation basically because we didn't have any documentary proof, and the police and no one else really wanted to discuss the matter. We now have documentary evidence to support the situation.
A district officers meeting in the region was last month told that a ration of petrol will be allotted to each vehicle in the patrol. If exceeded, the police on that duty will walk. Chief Inspector Phelps of the Wyong Patrol also stressed that there should be no mistake. Once the allocation of petrol has been reached, the vehicle or unit will then be grounded. Police Minister Ted Pickering today confirmed the entire New South Wales force was operating under a tight budget. He said the onus was on individual commanders to determine where the money should go and that petrol would obviously be given a fairly high priority. Chief Inspector Phelps was unavailable for comment on the issue today, but his peers ridiculed suggestions that petrol would be rationed.
A budget allocation which are nothing more than guidelines to each sector commander to enhance their expertise in management.
If your patrols exceed their budget, do they walk?
No, they certainly do not.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
The 600-kilo beasts are the top of the range in the stud bull market. Each year, the Wootton property west of Scone sells about 100 poll Hereford cattle, setting a benchmark for prices around the country.
The whole point of our breeding program is that we're trying to breed cattle that will function under normal Australian conditions, that don't require pampering.
The state of the beef industry in 1991 isn't a good sales pitch for the auction. With more than half of New South Wales affected by drought, buyers can't be taking too many chances with their money. Export markets too are facing tight times with cutbacks in orders from Japan, the US and Korea.
Well, right at the moment we have a hiccup here in Australia, there's no doubt.
Indeed, it was a cheap market. The top bull went for just $5,500. Last year's sale topped $12,000. Bull, cow and heifer prices were all down on 1990s average. It's a sign farmers are digging in for another rough season, not prepared to make the financial outlays or take a chance bringing in new stock onto already stretched pastures. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
As if watching her father Chris slowly die from motor neurone disease is not enough, 16-year-old Janae Thistlethwaite and her family have had to endure further frustration. A vital operation at the John Hunter Hospital to help restore her dad's ability to talk has been cancelled twice in the past 6 weeks. The reason? Insufficient beds.
I was just angry and frustrated because nobody will do anything just to help him, so I decided to.
The Lambton High student wrote to politicians, unions and hospital management pleading for her father's sake.
I was just sick of waiting around and watching Dad suffer. I don't think this is fair for someone as sick as my father to have to wait this long for an operation that will help him breathe easily.
Of the 11 letters Janae has sent out, she's received only 3 replies. Among those who haven't written back are the Prime Minister Bob Hawke, the local state member John Mills, and the Premier whose government has implemented the hospital cuts, Nick Greiner.
I think they're really slack and they just should look at the people who they're trying to lead, and they're not doing a very good job of it.
Mother Julie says the stress of waiting for the operation has almost pulled the family of 6 apart. But the Thistlethwaites have finally heard from the hospital that Chris will have his mouth operation Wednesday week. Until his speech is restored, Chris can only write what he feels.
We just hope that our story may help others in our situation and make the government realise people get sick and do need hospitals to have specialised treatment or surgery when they need it, not a year later when it's too late.
There's an old saying that anything out of the ordinary can only happen in the United States. But after seeing an entourage of eccentric machinery roll into Newcastle today, I'm not so sure. 9 semi-trailers were packed with vehicles rarely seen in these parts, a part of the Monster Truck Challenge 91 touring the country. Appearing at the Winfield International Motordrome tomorrow night will be a half-track that looks anything but like Daddy's Girl, Bigfoot, world-renowned for awesome performances, Kiwi Thunder, the Gravedigger, and a train that's definitely run off the rails. Add to the monster trucks the celebrity coupes and a lady who blows herself up with dynamite, the show is sure to grab the attention of the public. You would think that logistically the tour would be a nightmare to manage, but the opposite applies.
Well, we've travelled from Melbourne to Adelaide, right up to Darwin to Cairns and back down here so far, so we're doing pretty good. We're all still together.
How's the response been?
Tremendous. Actually, in Alice Springs we had 25% of the entire town. Last night in Gunnedah it was sold out. Coffs Harbour we had 6,000, so everywhere through Australia it's been tremendous, and we're looking forward to that in Newcastle.
"40 amateur players joined 60 budding professionals in the last of 5 rounds played this week on courses around the Newcastle district. Trainee pros crave for competition under tournament conditions, and today they were tested on the hilly Merriweather course. After the 18 holes, it was Mark Rainey from Charlestown who stormed home with a brilliant 69 to win by a shot from another local, Vince Owen from Belmont. Over the 5 rounds, the championship was won by Nowra trainee Danny Taylor, who aggregated for the 5 days 365. For the amateurs, Mark Woolnough with 42 Stableford points was victorious by 1 shot from Scott Johnson and Don Evenden.
As many as 3,000 people take to the 180-hectare reserve on a summer's day to enjoy its walking trails, picnic areas and animals. But this year they could be heading into a fire trap.
If you have as many as 3,000 people in the reserve at the one time, it's very difficult to try and clear the area for them to be safe. And also a lot of them tend to become spectators, and this also is a problem.
The water level in the ponds has dropped by ½ a metre in the last couple of weeks. Barbecues have been banned, and now the reserve's full-time ranger has to contend with firebugs. Conditions are the worst Ray Raisbeck has seen in more than a decade.
In 1979 we had a very serious blaze which took about 30 acres of the reserve, but this has the potential to be far worse because of the build-up of vegetation and the incredible dryness that we're having.
A hectare of bush went up yesterday. This morning volunteers were busy extinguishing smouldering stumps. As well as the risk to people and animals, there's a danger that a bushfire could spread to houses rimming the reserve.
I think that public interest will have to be served by placing a ban on the entry of people altogether.
Operation Slowdown was designed to get motorists to do just that. While there has been an increase statewide in the number of people speeding, police say fewer motorists in the Newcastle region have exceeded the limit this long weekend.
We're very pleased with the way the drivers are reacting out in the roadway. Everybody seems to be slowing down and abiding by the traffic rules.
Nevertheless, several hundred people have so far been fined for speeding and more than 20 have been charged with drink driving offences.
I think it's just driver education. I think the public is aware of what's going on. That all available police are out on the roadway, and we're there to keep the road safe.
While the police are pleased with the results, they warn motorists to take care this evening. Traffic is expected to be heavy as holidaymakers return after the long weekend break. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Thieves broke into Hamilton Mowers and Chainsaws sometime between Saturday afternoon and this morning when the shop reopened for business. The intruders dragged the safe from an office into the rear workshop where they used a crowbar to prise the door open. Staff are reluctant to give details of the exact amount taken, but it's believed to be more than $3,000. There have been a number of safe robberies in Newcastle over past weeks. On Thursday, a safe was stolen from Lane's Hardware, also in Hamilton, by thieves who stole the company car as well. The car was later found in East Maitland. The safe was found dumped on Ash Island on Saturday. An amount of cash and personal papers were missing. Police are reluctant to draw a connection between the two robberies, but warn that similar offences may occur. Police are appealing to the public for any information on either robbery. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Up against one of the glamour teams of the National Soccer League in their entry to the big time, the Breakers made plenty of chances, but a couple of lapses saw the final scoreline read 2-0 to Adelaide City. With the occasion having an influence on some players' composure, manager Bruce Stowell offered only words of encouragement.
Don't get disappointed, keep the heads up. We were playing well, we were creating chances, which was a good sign. So he told us to keep the same part in the second half and keep battling away.
None of the big crowd would have been disappointed with the first 90 minutes by the Breakers in the NSL. Captain Andy Koska, who's played at this level for many years, pointed to pace as a key factor.
And they will have to adjust to the tempo of the National League. You know, all the sides probably play as quick as Adelaide City. In fact, there's quite a few that play quicker. So, you know, that's something also that it's going to take a little bit of time to adjust. But I'm sure once the initial transition's over, I think the team will do okay.
This Friday night, another daunting prospect, South Melbourne. The league champions opened their 1991-92 campaign in brilliant fashion, flogging Preston 5-1. But for the Breakers, they would prefer to start the season against the best.
South Melbourne probably won't be quite as settled as what they will halfway through the year, so it's quite good to get them early on. You know, but once again, I think we're going to have to do a lot of hard work during the week and just hopefully, you know, the ball will bounce our way a little bit more this next weekend.
The rural sector is under great stress with a statewide drought. Maitland is one of the driest regions, and Agriculture Minister Ian Armstrong came to town to give some soothing words from the government.
I know a lot of people across this state over the years, and people who I regard as sound managers in both financial terms and in terms of livestock. This time round are totally frustrated and just not knowing where to turn next.
With Liberal member Peter Blackmore by his side, Mr Armstrong gave the locals an example of some of his skills from Parliament, selling a yard of cattle. The Minister announced a new scheme for drought-affected farmers to seek advice. A 008 phone number will be set up at the Maitland Department of Agriculture over the next 2 weeks, giving information on supplementary feeds, agistment options and financial support. A similar operation at Dubbo takes an average of 100 calls a week. The drought has cost the state government $15 million. Despite massive cutbacks in the health and public sectors, the Minister promised more funding to save agriculture.
For many decades, riggers have enjoyed a well-deserved reputation as a rare breed with a head for heights and at least a healthy respect for danger. But the riggers at Newcastle Workers Club are among a handful in the state trialling a revolutionary new safety harness. The site project managers, Civil and Civic, say rising workers' compensation costs and a drive to greater workplace safety have compelled them to tighten requirements.
Traditionally, they've been working at height and taking risks which they don't need to take. And what we're doing is meeting our responsibilities as employers and providing a safe working environment.
The riggers aren't so sure. They say the harness is constricting, can easily tangle them and requires one hand to guide the lead.
I think they're a pain in the arse. They're dangerous.
Civil and Civic say the safety record on the Workers Club site is all the proof they need to introduce the system on other sites, and they expect rival construction firms to soon follow suit.
Whilst it will take some time to get accepted, the employees can see what the benefits are because unfortunately they're only allowed one mistake in this industry and can often prove fatal.
The Workers Club continues to take shape. The cavernous auditorium is now a reality and Club Secretary-Manager Wayne Dean says work is on target.
We're very pleased with the progress to date and we've had some good weather to help.
The new look Workers Club should open for business from June next year. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
It's not unusual for these birds to be tossed around by a sea storm. They live at sea and this time every year they pass the Newcastle coastline on their journey south. This time, however, the fierce sea squall claimed possibly hundreds of the birds, forcing others to seek shelter on the coast.
We're assuming that they were on their migratory trip down and they got hit by a squall. Now they're a flock bird, they go as a group, and we know of 2 at Swansea and 1 at Redhead. The 2 at Swansea are both dead. The 1 at Redhead's at the RSPCA, and we are assuming that there will be others along the beach.
Tina Wigman and other members of the Native Animal Trust Fund found at least 50 of the birds on Newcastle Beach late yesterday. She brought 25 home to care for. These 13 are the only shearwaters to survive the night.
Underneath, because it's really thick, inside they're fairly quickly easy to warm. We use the reading lamps as you saw in there. And we confined them into small areas so that they got body heat from each other. We covered them over and completely left them alone. No interruptions or anything like that, and they stayed under lamps all night.
The birds cannot be fed in captivity, so they must be set free as soon as possible. Late this afternoon, Tina and her family released the birds at Newcastle's Horseshoe Beach. Although a little hesitant, they were soon enjoying their freedom.
The official crowd at Austral Park on opening night was 8,093, quite staggering for a new club in the big time. But Newcastle has always loved its football and the team that represents it. And although down 2-0 to Adelaide City, the final outcome was nearly irrelevant as fans thoroughly enjoyed the atmosphere. Of course, there were a few teething problems for organisers who did have a headache or two to deal with.
Well, I think after normally getting 500 people a game here to go to over 8,000 was a fairly big effort by the club. But everybody on that night worked tremendously, and I think the majority of people here to my knowledge, had a great night. And I think we'll get a good crowd this week again.
Is there anything that you've done this week to improve on that first night?
Well, we've tidied up all the little minor problems we've had in getting people through the turnstiles and trying to improve the food vans and various things like that. So I think it'll be a lot better this week.
Tomorrow night's opponents are the current champions, and South Melbourne were brilliant in their 5-1 drubbing of Preston last week. The BHP Breakers have trained well this week, and all but Dominic Longo declared fit for the match.
Dominic has a hamstring strain and at this stage is about 80% fit, so he's doubtful at the moment. I'm just not sure what Bruce is doing, but he'll probably bring Andy Roberts into the squad and decide what his final team is just before the kick-off on Friday night.
During the last 2 days, around 50 shearwaters have been found along the coast between Newcastle and Swansea. Those that survived were cared for by the Native Animal Trust Fund. It was thought the problem was under control, but around 3,000 dead birds have since been discovered along an 8-kilometre stretch of Stockton Beach. The National Parks and Wildlife Service rescued around a dozen birds, but the beach south from Barruby Point is littered with dead birds thought to have been brought in by the tide. Port Stephens council officers inspected the area this morning. Although almost certain the birds died from natural exhaustion, they are taking no chances.
Without causing any alarm, initially our concern is that, as you say, that there hasn't been some form of algal bloom or toxic waste of the like that has interrupted the food chain. If that be the case, that those tests should come back from the National Parks and Wildlife. We hope to have those results very early next week.
According to Mr Alexander, a similar situation occurred on the beach in the early 80s. While the National Parks and Wildlife Service attempt to unravel the mystery, Council's major concern is the possible health risk to those who use the beach. Although the tide is taking some of the birds out to sea, Council may have to use other means to clear the area.
Those ones that are left beyond the high tide mark appear that they will be a problem that we'll have to address.
Anyone who finds an exhausted bird should contact the Native Animal Trust Fund. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Mini trotting is extremely popular amongst the pacing fraternity, with youngsters able to learn to control horses under race conditions. And they are deadly serious, with the final of the Newcastle Championships being won by Wonder Horse Strawberry Road from Sydney. But the next race held most interest, an invitation celebrity affair where big bucks were waged. Well, someone did see 50 cents change hands, and of course the thought of race rigging wasn't a factor. As they headed home, it was anyone's race, with Dave's Dasher, Sweetie Pie and Rockin' Robin chasing the huge purse. As we went to air, stewards were still hearing 11 protests, with a final result not expected for days.